I'm not messing with you. It's just nice to meet another human who shares my affinity for elf culture.
If you've never seen Will Ferrell's pitch-perfect performance as Buddy the Elf, then you are
I'm a cotton-headed ninny-muggins.
and you've missed out on the finest festive movie made in the 21st century. This movie has everything to set you in the Christmas spirit. Dangerous levels of candy, old-fashioned sing-alongs, and even a North Pole narwhal.
Bye, buddy. Hope you find your dad.
Thanks, Mr. Narwhal.
This feel-good family favorite hits all the right buttons, but unlike most Hollywood hits, Elf has never had a sequel. This doesn't mean it doesn't have a legacy, though. In fact, Elf might just be the film that has had the biggest impact on the Disney empire since Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs was released in 1937.
You sit on a throne of lies.
Here's the crazy thing, though. Elf is not a Disney movie at all. It was produced and distributed by New Line Cinema. So how could a movie not made by Disney become so influential on the House of Mouse? Well, for that, you need to look towards Elf's director, Jon Favreau. Jon Favreau may be more recognizable to many as an actor. His credits include Happy Hogan in the MCU, more of that later, and as Pete Becker, Monica's rich UFC fighting boyfriend in season 3 of Friends.
It would be nice after hearing 20,000 people chant, "You suck."
But Jon's credits are even more impressive behind the camera lens. Jon started off his film career in the indie scene with his buddy and longtime collaborator Vince Vaughn.
Baby, you are so money and you don't even know it.
Elf was by far the biggest gig of his career at that point, and it was by no means a simple directing gig either. The production involved a lot of camera trickery and forced perspective set pieces to make Buddy stand out as the only human in the elf-sized world of the North Pole. Jon would mix live action with stop-motion animation that was a direct homage to the 1964 Christmas classic, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer.
For crying out loud!
But Jon's attention to detail really paid off, and Elf went on to make over $200 million in box office revenue alone. It's no wonder then that Hollywood took notice of this director's blockbuster potential.
You're good.
One producer who must have watched Elf more than once was Marvel's studio head, Kevin Feige. Kevin had been working alongside Marvel since the year 2000, and in 2007, he was named president of production for Marvel Studios. Kevin had realized that while Marvel had already licensed big characters like the X-Men and Spider-Man to other movie studios, Marvel still owned the rights to the core members of the Avengers. He began envisioning a franchise of interconnected films that would come to be known as the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
I'm sorry, I don't want to get off on the wrong foot. Do I look at the patch or the eye?
But for such an ambitious plan to work, Marvel knew their first film needed to be a success. They chose to begin the MCU with Iron Man. And who did they choose to direct such an important film for the studio? Well, if you've gotten this far into the video, that should be obvious by now.
You know, look, I got a real job. What do you want? I'm working. I got something going on here.
Jon Favreau brought a lot of what he had learned making Elf and applied it to the newest Marvel superhero flick. And much of what he did created the template that the MCU still uses to this day, with much box office success. Jon knew the success of Elf had a lot to do with just how perfectly suited Will Ferrell's wide-eyed wonderment was for the role.
I just like to smile. Smiling's my favorite.
Jon knew Iron Man needed a similar star-making turn, and he was not afraid of fighting the studio to cast the perfect Tony Stark. At the time, Robert Downey Jr. was rebuilding his career after troubles with substance abuse, and it was seen as a huge risk. But Jon knew that Robert had tremendous acting talent and a charismatic likability that was essential for the role. Jon argued successfully for Robert to be cast, and he became one of the foundational members of the MCU.
Was that so hard? That was fun, right?
Some of Elf's most memorable moments, like this one,
10 a.m. Santa's coming to town.
Santa! Oh my God!
Santa here? I know him. I know him.
were all improvised. Jon knew Will Ferrell's background as an SNL comedian and made sure there were plenty of takes so Will could improvise and try things out on set.
I'd be doing myself a disservice and every member of this band if I didn't perform the hell out of this.
Favreau brought this style of filmmaking over to the Iron Man film as well. Jeff Bridges, who plays the villain in the first Iron Man movie, claims it was almost all improvised. Jon, Robert, and Jeff would have an outline of each scene, but they would improvise much of the dialogue on the day. In fact, Robert's famous line,
I am Iron Man,
was improvised, and it went on to become one of the most famous lines in the franchise, being repeated at the end of Avengers Endgame.
I am
Jon was also instrumental in setting the family-friendly tone for the MCU. Another skill he picked up from Elf. The Dark Knight trilogy looked to reframe superhero movies as much darker affairs, but by keeping the tone lighter, Jon allowed the MCU to embrace some of the sillier elements of the universe, and for many fans to grow up watching the franchise.
What are you doing?
Oh, and bonus fun fact, did you know Peter Billingsley, best known as Ralphie Parker from A Christmas Story, shows up in Elf, Iron Man, and the Spider-Man series? He was a close collaborator of Jon's and helped produce Elf and Iron Man as well.
Oh, fudge.
But wait, I know some of you are thinking, well, this is all incredibly interesting, but wasn't this video supposed to be about Disney? Well, only 1 year after the release of Iron Man, Disney purchased Marvel Entertainment for $4 billion.
And not a penny more.
And it has used the Iron Man template to become one of Disney's most lucrative production companies. But that's not where Jon's relationship with Disney ends.
I don't know what I would do without this job. I mean, before I met Tony,
Disney had experimented with live-action remakes before. Notably, the 101 Dalmatians movie in the mid-90s starring Glenn Close as Cruella de Vil. But in 2010, Disney found they had $1 billion hit on their hands with Alice in Wonderland. A string of live-action remakes began to follow suit. Two of their most beloved properties, The Jungle Book and The Lion King, would be tricky to adapt to this format. Have you ever tried to get a real-life grizzly to sing the bare necessities? Yeah, that wasn't gonna work. They needed to rely on CGI to bring these films to life, while still retaining the big song and dance numbers that made these films so beloved. And who did they rely on to bring these two mammoth movies to life?
seriously?
Yeah.
Of course it was. And he did pretty well with it too, casting two of the world's biggest celebrities, Beyoncé and Donald Glover, as Nala and Simba, respectively. The Lion King, while listed among Disney's live-action remakes, is actually an animation and holds the record for the biggest opening weekend for an animated movie in USA and Canada, and is only behind Frozen 2 for biggest openings worldwide. So while The Lion King didn't receive the greatest reviews, it was not a bad little money earner for the House of Mouse.
1 million, 2 million, 3 million, 4!
It was while Jon was directing The Lion King that he made his pitch to another Disney executive to get his hands on another beloved franchise. It is safe to say Star Wars is a lucrative IP for the Disney Corporation, and one they are very protective over.
I will not part with a single coin.
In 2017, Star Wars was riding very high on the success of The Force Awakens and Rogue One. They had a slew of Star Wars productions lined up and ready to roll. This was when Jon pitched his idea of The Mandalorian, a Western-style TV show set in the Star Wars universe. He wrote the first 4 episodes before the show was even commissioned, because he knew if he was going to do Star Wars, it was going to be in his own way. This might be why The Mandalorian remained on the plate when so many other Star Wars products were canceled after Solo, a Star Wars story, bombed at the box office. Disney was so confident in The Mandalorian that they built their streaming service Disney Plus around its launch. And Disney were so satisfied with the viewership, they quickly commissioned a second season which was released last year. And there we have it. In only a few short steps, we have moved from Will Ferrell's man-child dressed in green to the masked hero of very few words.
This is the way.
This is the way.
With a range like this, you can see why the head honchos at Disney have trusted Jon with so many of its most valuable franchises.
Once he comes to terms with reality, he should drop the whole elf thing and move on with his life. I mean, that's what I would do if I were you.
Jon Favreau's name may not be the first on your lips when it comes to naming the most important directors of our time. But when it comes to delivering giant blockbusters that have tremendous legacies, then Jon Favreau is absolutely up there with the best of them. So what is next for Mr. Favreau? Well, it looks like he is as busy as ever. The Book of Boba Fett is due to be released at the end of 2021, continuing his relationship with the Star Wars universe. His character in the first Iron Man movie, Happy Hogan, is set to return in the latest Spider-Man. And both Jungle Book and The Lion King have sequels in development. As for Elf, well, that's the only universe Jon doesn't look likely to be returning to anytime soon. But with so many wonderful movies on his resume, it seems like there will always be room for Jon Favreau on our nice list.
There's room for everyone on the nice list.